Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing In the Heights, which, due to some COVID delays, came out this year, and Fiddler on the Roof, which came out in 1971. The connection being that they are both musicals dealing with change and holding on to your culture in the midst of that change. I mean, we talked a lot about how we would connect these two movies, but I think that's probably the cleanest and fairest way. Yeah. Fiddler on the Roof. Sarah, give us a bit of an overview of this 1971 film.
Wow, what a classic, Fiddler on the Roof. It's a film directed by Norman Jewison, and it stars the inimitable Topol. Now, Topol plays father of a family. He has a wife and 5 daughters, and they are living in relative poverty in a small village called Anatevka in pre-revolutionary Russia. It's a story about tradition and culture, and as you said, Jeremy, the times they are a-changing as the Russian authorities began to encroach on the village of Anatevka and force change in the most violent and difficult and ultimately sad of ways. But musically, my gosh, what a film. We are in for a treat today.
And something of a cultural phenomenon as well. It was big of its time, and it's sort of sustained through musical theatre enthusiasm over the last wee while. Which brings us to In the Heights, which is a Lin-Manuel Miranda musical. It's his first musical. It came out in the mid-2000s and won Best Tony, the Best Tony Musical Award. And Lin-Manuel Miranda's sort of since gone on to have a very successful career, mostly known for Hamilton. But this is his first show, and it details Uznavi, the main character who lives in Washington Heights, and the different people in his life, in his community. Gentrification is a big part of their struggles, as is finding home in a place far away from Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Chile, and a number of different South American and Caribbean islands. It deals with themes of feeling otherised in places like university. It deals with themes of trying to make by with a business when other families are moving into the area with more money. And it's ultimately about finding home in a place that maybe doesn't always feel like home. And that is In the Heights. William, start us off. Where are we jumping in?
Sure, well, the first thing to talk about, I think, really is how much connective tissue is between these two musicals and these two film adaptations. I think we didn't really think about the ramifications of picking Fiddler compared to In the Heights when we talked about this a couple of months ago. But my goodness, there's a lot of meat on this bone.
Yeah, there really is. Yeah.
With In the Heights and with Fiddler, I mean, both musicals are... they are American produced and American written, but deal with such culturally specific narratives which bring in almost marginalized storytelling and these communities that you don't usually see, especially either on or off Broadway, into the greater consciousness. One came out in 1964, the other one came out in 2005, and yet I think they both have that same kind of power of telling these smaller stories in a way that has cross-cultural ramifications.
Absolutely. I was bowled over. I watched In the Heights before returning to Fiddler. Now, Fiddler is a show that I know very well, as I've rambled on to you fellas. I was in the chorus of my high school musical version of this back in the mid-80s when I lived in Singapore, and we had an incredible international cast. So talk about colorblind casting, which I think we'll get onto a little maybe. My goodness, you can imagine at UWC, international students, it's going to be an international cast. And I will just say at this point that in the dancing crew of Cossacks in my high school production of Fiddler on the Roof was a young man called Kevin Stay, who went on to become one of Madonna's backing dancers in her Blonde Ambition tour.
Wow, is he in the, is it called Strike a Pose?
Yes, I believe he is. So
goodness.
Kevin Stay, who was an amazing dancer back in high school, then went on to be super famous. But anyway, Fiddler, oh my goodness. So rewatching it this time, I was really struck by the similarities in terms of So we're talking vaguely, aren't we, about immigrant stories? And in the Heights, of course, the immigrants have come to New York or come to America, land of plenty. And in Fiddler, they are indigenously of Russia or the wider Russian, what would it have been, the Federation or whatever it was back in those days, right? And then they are displaced and made to move on. But it's a Jewish story.
Yes.
And that's the point. And yes, both films for me were really beautiful and warming and enlightening in terms of teaching me about cultures that I know a little bit about, but not really. They were both very similar in terms of showing the traditions of eating, the traditions of the various rituals of either being together, whether it's in the Russian bar or it's in the nail salon in the Heights, and really teaching you about different cultures being in a place where they're not necessarily wanted or accepted or whatever.
It's worth saying at this point, and we always have this warning, we will be spoilering both films, and there are some really great surprises in both movies that you would not want to have spoiled. So I think if you haven't seen either In the Heights or Fiddler on the Roof, pause this episode and come back. But yeah, I agree with both of what you're saying. I think Fiddler on the Roof has a real warmth about it. I came to Fiddler on the Roof really recently. I went and saw an amateur production that my friends were in here in Auckland, and I saw the heart of this really great show. And I immediately, the next day, I think we finished on Saturday night. I went to sleep. Sunday morning, I had the day off, and it was cold and raining, and I put on the 1971 film. It's 3 hours long. It's not a quick watch.
No.
But I went into a sort of warmth, blankety, Sunday rainy afternoon trance, I guess, and just loved this film. I think the opening with what's the main character's name?
Tevye.
Tevye the Milkman.
Tevye the Milkman, who I understand was very young when he made this movie.
Topo, yeah.
Made up to look older, and he's played this role
throughout his life. I went to see Topo as Tevye in 2007 when he
At
came
the
to
Civic?
Auckland. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. And he still has it. I think he was acting... He's since retired now, I think, but he had acted the role for decades upon decades.
Apparently, he's played the role 3,500 times.
Oh my goodness!
On stage in various iterations. And so, just to very quickly fill in on this, because we were doing a bit of reading about it at home, that the original Tevye was another actor.
Zero Mostel.
That's right.
Yes,
And
from the producers.
That's exactly right. And who didn't make it into the film. And what happened was Tevye Topol. Topol, the actor who is Israeli, was performing the role in theatre somewhere, and then he went back to Israel to fight in the 6-Day War.
Wow.
And then he came back to the stage, and it was then that I think Norman Jewison, the director, saw him on the stage, either in London or on Broadway, and said, "Oh, I'll have him to play Tevye in the film."
Because I know Zero Mostel was very, very upset that he was not cast in the movie.
Wow. And now, of course, Topol is synonymous with
Tevye.
Fiddler on the Roof and with Tevye. And I guess if you're going to play the role 3,500 times, A, you better love it, and B, why not make it your signature thing?
Yeah.
One of the things that impressed me about the story in the film is that because it's so culturally rooted and tradition is such a key part of the story and what you're able to compromise on in order to survive, the some of those traditions which we look now, and even in the 70s was like, or 60s, they were kind of going through a time of particularly women's rights coming forward, and so, the matchmaker and the way that the men are the head of the house, and it really what's the word? It stands the test of time.
Yes.
I think it's got a real strength about it, and the fact that they're fiercely religious and they have these traditions, and yet everybody sort of got these sly winks to the camera and the ways that the women kind of have this place, but they equally are subverting it, and Tevye, he's got this faith, but he sort of plays with it, and there's a real currentness to it that. Yeah, timelessness maybe.
I think a lot of that can be attributed mainly to the film version as well, because I think I've seen a couple of stage versions of Fiddler where it does feel kind of pat and a little
old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned, anachronistic, but also really of its time. Whereas I think the film version really takes a very almost naturalistic bent and shows you what kind of person it takes to actually survive in such an environment as Anatevka. Like in the opening number tradition, when they mention the daughters or the mamas, And they're not doing traditionally feminine things, right? Or maybe they're cooking, but you see them rolling hay and doing hard farm labor. And it's like, this feels real, and these feel more like real people than actors or singers.
I agree. And I guess to jump into In the Heights, one of the things that struck me almost immediately in that opening number were the shots of the community and people getting up. I was struck with emotion through most of this movie, but seeing again a community that felt very real. It felt like, and to allude to what you were saying earlier, William, it felt like there were things being shown that haven't been shown before.
Yeah.
And it was a celebration of community and the realities of life. Like, it wasn't this. I mean, it was a kind of romanticized version, but it wasn't without losing that reality and the kind of hard work and the just people going about their business.
Particularly, you're right, in that 8-minute opening of In the Heights, which I have to say, when we started watching Fiddler, and it's so slow, dun, 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 and I went, well, here's a point of difference between those two films. In the Heights, da, 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 you know. And yet, yeah, it's very striking when everybody's getting ready for work, and then they're all coming down the stairs in their tenement buildings and out into the streets, and it's all goey, and absolutely, it's realistic, but beautiful. But yes, establishing so much. Here's how we make the coffee. You don't have the milk, don't worry about it. Use the not the clotted cream. What
condensed milk.
Use the condensed milk. Hey, great. You know, boom, 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 and off we go. So yeah.
It's interesting you say about the slowness of Fiddler, because it is, but it really earns that boom, boom,
It
boom,
does.
boom, boom. Quick cuts to all the imagery, the religious imagery. It's
Amazing.
so
Amazing.
thrilling.
And for 3 hours, I thought, oh my gosh, you know, look, I know this and I love this, but oh my goodness, can we do? And oh yes, you can.
And even
It's
though
totally engaging.
you watch it with the knowledge of what comes in Act 2,
Yes.
and the tragedy and the sadness, and yet it's so buoyed by the performances and by the momentum. Even the real sad bits
Absolutely.
have like this tinge of hope and joy. When Hodder was standing beside the train, far from the home I love,
That's my favorite. That's my favorite moment of
Are
the
you
show.
serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it wasn't when I saw it on live. I saw it on the stage. I saw it at Manukau Performing Arts, which is, I realised as we were talking, is I did In the Heights at Manukau Performing Arts. So my introduction to both of these musicals was through that theatre. But that moment, I think it's. There's this expectation that the girls are going to marry whoever the matchmaker says or whoever their father says, and it's Tevye's journey of really loving his daughters and loving them in an active way where they're able to make their own path. And that moment is a chance where she really gets to communicate something quite abstract, which is, I'm really going to miss my home, but I've got a new home. And seeing his reaction to that and his revelation of that, it's a really complicated concept, human concept, and it's a beautiful piece of music, and it's tragic, and it's uplifting, and it's all of these things together. So yeah, for me, that's
I found that scene very hard, very sad, and very hard to watch. But it isn't my favourite song. We'll get on to my favourite song. I'll even do a bit for you. No.
I think that the thing about that, of course, is it's also juxtaposed with his farewell with Carver.
Oh, which is
even worse. And
devastating.
it's like, where does he draw the line, right?
Yeah.
With his daughters, even though, as you say, Jeremy, he's showing active love to his daughters, there is a point in his life when it comes to what he holds most dear, in this case, his religious fervor, that he cannot sacrifice one over the other. And it weighs upon him so hard that even when he's saying goodbye at the very end of the show, it's in a very, very, almost downbeat kind of way.
I want to make 2 points about the romantic relationships. One, I'm so grateful to the writers of Fiddler on the Roof that they didn't just prolong angry dad, girls having to run around behind his back,
I agree.
which is a trope that we see time and again. And then there's always some sort of rapprochement, yawn. Well, I'm really glad that they didn't do that, because also it makes Tevye a deeply, deeply likable, sympathetic, wonderful character.
And I know you're trying to make a point, but I just have to say, I think those two elements is what contributes to both the reality that you're talking about, William, and the reason why I love it's that timelessness. It still survives because it makes both of them real people.
Yes,
But yeah.
rather than caricatures or stereotypes, exactly. And the other thing that I really like or really enjoy is when you think about it with the three daughters, Zeitel goes against him with Mottel, but at least Mottel is part of the community. They ask his permission first.
And they know who he is. They've known him since childhood. Yeah.
And then the next one, the stakes are a little bit higher because actually Perchik is from out of town and he's got a big mouth on him and he's got brash ideas and they don't even need to ask his permission, and it's that little bit harder. And then Chava, bless her, goes off with a bloody Russian. And so that's like the sort of the worst or the hardest thing for him to overcome. I think that's really interesting writing. I really like it, and I like it more than other films like West Side Story, even like In the Heights. It's a little bit different, but you know, where it's just like, I don't want you with that guy. So, and obviously we'll get into the comparison with the romances in the Heights. But yeah, I like that about Fiddler.
Let's talk about that, because one of the things that there's many changes that they've made from In the Heights in the film from the stage musical.
That's interesting.
And I guess to segue into the father-daughter relationship in The Heights, which is the kind of core of that story, I would say, at least in the show, and they've kind of brought Usnavi more into the central limelight in the film.
Interesting.
But she in the show,
and we're talking about the daughter who goes to Stanford,
yeah,
goes to law school.
Nina, and her father
runs the taxi company.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right
Kevin
now.
Rosario.
Kevin Rosario.
That's right.
So Kevin, he in the show doesn't want her to date Benny because he's not Latino. And so that's the central tension. And there's a mother character as well who kind of gets over it and just, you know, she eventually says, choose what you like as long as you come home. Like, stop fighting, you two.
Right.
But they've sort of shifted the story.
Because she doesn't have a mother anymore. It's
she
just her
doesn't
and
have
her
a
dad.
mother. And her central tension is not as well in the show. She leaves university because she's having to work multiple jobs to survive.
Right.
Whereas in this one, it's very much, in the film, it's very much, I've been otherised. I don't feel like I've got a place there. Why would I leave my community and go to this other community that I don't feel at home in? And that becomes the tension between the father and daughter relationship.
And that feels like a message that's much more understood in 2021 or 2020 than 2005.
I think that's fair. I mean, the race relations it's not as relevant as that otherizing story, and also the undocumented story.
Ah, yes,
which they've added into the film with Sonny.
Very, very odd. I would say I'm not a fan of that stuff.
Which stuff?
The DACA, where Sonny and Nina go to the rally and everything. I felt incredibly out of place. The whole structure of the movie kind of stops for a second, and there's some dialogue which feels really, really odd and unnatural. It didn't surprise me one bit when, Jeremy, you told me that all that stuff was new.
Yeah, I actually didn't fully understand what was happening because I didn't know the full context of what's been going on in those communities. So in some way, it was a little bit of a hindrance to me connecting. But in other ways, I'm now aware of this situation that I wasn't aware of before.
Jeremy, is Sonny's arc basically the same as in the musical, or did they change it up quite a bit?
Though he doesn't have a father. Well, he doesn't have a. We don't see his father in the musical. He is just merely Usnavi's cousin. Who
He's the kid.
He's the kid.
He's adorable.
Yeah,
he's the best actor in the whole thing.
He's great. He's great.
But he's brilliant. I think in the musical as well, the money comes into it much more clearly. Right. So I guess to talk about the most heartbreaking moment of that film for me, it's the Abuela song, Carlo, where it's like her final death song. In the show, that's not what it is. I like what they did in the movie, but in the show, she sings it during Act 1, and the end of that song is her revealing to the audience that she's got the winning ticket.
Yeah. And
so the money kind of comes into it more, and Sonny, Usnavi, and Abuela sharing this money and what they're going to do with this money is a lot of the discussion in the second act.
Is that why it's therefore sad in the show when she dies?
In the show,
she's not going to be part of it.
In the show, you know the big Carnival number where they all dance in the street?
Yeah.
That is... the show takes place over 3 days. So Act 1 is one day, Act 2 is the second day, and then there's a sort of an epilogue.
Well, we know that from the movie because it says 3 days before blackout, 2 days before blackout.
Which I appreciated. Because in the show that just happens.
Yeah. Right.
It just blacks out and you've got to figure out what's going on. But they sing that song. Usnavi comes in and says, "We've won $96,000." Everyone's like, "Whoa!" And that's how the whole big explosion at the end happens.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas in the movie, he sort of just comes in and says, "I'm leaving," and they're like, "Whoa! We kind of already knew that." And at the end of that number, this big, vibrant, the whole audience is up. You come in with Kevin Rosario singing that over the radio that Abuela's just passed away.
Oh, okay.
And so it happens off stage, and it happens.
I like it better in the movie.
It works well in the movie. I tell you what, the movie.
Because you know she's going. You know she's dying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's
And
all those
so
hints.
it's really beautiful. And her looking from her bed and smiling, and her face is, I mean, it's glowing in an actually way, obviously also in an actual, it's being lit way, and it's beautiful, and you know that she's looking and going, this is my familia, and I love them, and they're going to be okay, and Usnavi's going to be okay, and there's this lovely piece. And then, of course, I actually liked her number in the subway better than most of the songs in the whole show.
Me too.
And I liked the filmicness of it. I liked the old-fashioned
overall,
depiction.
That number and the one at the end between Nina and Benny were my two favorite numbers. I think more so than anything else.
Nice. That number that she does as well, it works in the film because you can have all of this abstract spiritual story and choice.
Flashbacky stuff.
Well, the flashback happens in the show, so she kind of remembers, and the whole cast comes on dressed, well, we did anyway, dressed in older clothes.
Oh, right,
We're
right.
furiously getting changed at the back while she's singing the first half of the song.
Right.
But I guess the existential crisis
Right.
of it is a really wonderful layer that I was crying from the moment the song started because I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It is impressive. It's interesting you say about that number with Nina and Benny as well, because the second act of the show has multiple ballads. Nina, the second act opens with a ballad between the two of them. You know, they spent the night together and they sing a song about learning Spanish or something. And then she has a ballad after Abuela, which is the third ballad in a row, following Abuela's death. And then they have that number from the movie. And I think they just cleaned that up gave them... Because they already have two ballads earlier. They already have two duets, sorry. They have the Benny's Dispatch right at the start. They have the one in the playground and Tell Me About the Town. And then that's the third one. And I think it works.
Maybe now's a good time to, and we'll come back to everything, guys, but let's segue into then the musicality of these musicals, because I have some views.
Go.
Well, so I had no prior anything of In the Heights. I hadn't heard the show, apart from maybe a little bit of the trailer. That would be the extent of In the Heights, and that's still, to this moment, the only bit of the whole, musics that I can remember is In the
Sorry,
Heights.
for me, it's that and the Iceman. Piragua.
Oh, yeah.
Piragua.
I wouldn't have remembered that at all. So
It's
no.
Lil singing his own song.
Oh, yeah, okay, we'll come to that.
And he comes... Oh, Jeremy, so after you told me about the end stinger, which I didn't stay behind to see, I watched it on YouTube, and it's really cute.
Yeah, it's great.
So I went into In the Heights knowing none of the music at all. I had only seen maybe a smidgen of the trailer. All the music aspect of it that I would have known would be In the Heights, and that's to this day actually the only bit that I can really remember from the whole thing. So it's fine, and obviously there are some similarities with Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton. I do quite enjoy the da 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 kind of almost hip-hoppy rap aspects to it.
You said iambic pentameter when we were talking the other day. You
I
keep
did.
wanting to
I
say
call
that.
it iambic penta, but it's not really. But it's that sort of patter and that's great and that's fine and it's mildly innovative. But for me, the rest of the musicality of it was very ordinary and, as you say, ballads. Now, I think that the singers sing beautifully and that's nice, but none of the songs to me are particularly striking or memorable. I'm not talking about Abuela and I'm not talking about the crowd scenes, because actually give me the Carnevale and definitely give me the nail bar scene and all that, and I love a big ensemble kind of, go hard, but the lovers I'm talking about, and therefore don't really care. And because for me there wasn't any drama around, not that I can remember anyway, I don't remember any conflict around the romantic relationships.
There's a little bit of conflict.
What was that?
After the club, where Vanessa's like, you left me at the club all alone and all the stuff, and
Yeah, but then they go, oh, sorry about it, and she
Yeah.
goes, oh, that's okay then. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, no, I don't know. I don't know. There wasn't any big conflict. I'm not suggesting I wanted it, but there wasn't any. So therefore, who cares? That everybody in here is going to be fine was my feeling. By comparison, and it's difficult to say because I've been listening to Fiddler since 1987. But those are songs and those are numbers, and I don't love all of them equally. But Sunrise, Sunset at the Wedding is exceptionally beautiful. I love Sabbath Prayer, and I really do love. I love the minor key, and I love the melodic and harmonic progressions of the slightly Russian tinged, Jewish tinged. Minor key songs. I find all that really musically exciting and brilliant. And by comparison, for me, In the Heights, no.
It's so interesting you said that about the crowd scene, Sarah, because I think I'm the exact opposite with you. Like, I really, really like the intimate moments. As I said, I think the highlight for me in the Heights was Nina and Benny's ballad with the visuals.
Do you mean them running up the building?
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's when the movie really came to life, and I think I actively disliked all the crowd scenes. I found them too packed, claustrophobic. I was getting a little bit nauseous in places watching that stuff on the big screen.
It's quite full on, yeah.
Yeah, and I found it was just there was too much stimulus, and in a way that wasn't very, or maybe this is just me, but it felt in a way it wasn't staged in a way that made visual sense. And became chaotic when it was supposed to be exciting, especially the scene in the nail salon. It was like, what the heck is going on? There's too much stuff. The mannequins are moving. Oh, now they're tapping on their nails. And then also in the swimming pool scene and later on as well, I did not like that stuff. But when it just focused on two people, and for example, Benny and Nina, or the whole champagne number, where I don't think the song's very good, but the staging is very, very good. And I think it's all one take. And it just, okay, this is visually coherent and I am into this.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair point.
I mean, my experience with In the Heights is doing the show, as I mentioned, and I knew nothing about In the Heights. I didn't know who Lin-Manuel Miranda was. I don't even think I knew what Hamilton was when I did the show, and Hamilton had been out for a year or 2 years or something by that point. Maybe a year. It came out in 2016, didn't it?
Yes.
And I did In the Heights in 2017. And I love the music in this show. I've listened to the album consistently since doing the show. When you do a show, you can get sick of the music because you've done it every night for however many weeks.
But don't you think you also grow the familiarity, makes you love it more?
I guess so, but one of the things that impressed me when I was doing In the Heights that is beyond just familiarity is the harmonies and the rhythms and the intonation of the music. I don't even know if intonation is the right word, but just the way that it's put together is so different to other musicals that I've done. And I think it is that sort of Latina flair with the hip-hop flair.
Yeah.
And I think those three threads coming together was quite an exciting musical to sing backup vocals to, because that was the majority of what I did. I did harmonies, I had a few little solo lines, but I was the male ensemble. I jokingly say I was the male ensemble number 2 in an ensemble of 1, because when they released the cast list, it was male ensemble 1, to be confirmed, male ensemble 2, Jeremy Downing. And my friend Adam, who directed it, he said, we had someone who was number 1. He pulled out at the last minute, and I thought was going to fill it, and they never did. And so I quite like the fact that
you're the understudy for the primary guy. Okay.
So I have a great affinity to this music in a way that I guess I feel like with many of the musicals that I've done, but because this one was so different to... Like, I love Mamma Mia as well, the ABBA music, but the ABBA music is almost like an algorithm of perfection.
Yes.
This was not that. We had to really get our heads out of traditional Western musical rhythms. So I love it for that. But I also love the Fiddler on the Roof music.
Yeah.
All the things that you said.
That's
all
good.
the things you said, I agree with. The minor keys, it's just beautiful, that music.
Oh, that's interesting, because you are newer to that than William and I. So, interesting.
I think the music in Fiddler is so interesting that it is at the same time very folk tuney and also very, very Jewish / very, very Russian. and also at the same time extremely Broadway. Like
Yes.
You could listen to it and think, this is probably a Broadway show, and
Yeah.
you'd be correct.
Yeah.
And it treads that fine line, and I think the orchestrations in the movie version by John Williams are amazing.
Yeah.
Did he got nominated, or did he win the Academy Award for the rearranged score?
I'm not sure. I know that Fiddler won at least 3 Oscars, and it was nominated for about 8, and it did win for sound, and I thought it won for either soundtrack or score. I guess it must be score then, mustn't it?
Because the score is amazing.
Yes.
What on stage feels, kind of very stagey and very production tuney. The movie just takes that and ups the bombast, makes it really cinematic in a way that just opens everything up in an oral experience.
And look, he's masterful, right? And he's been doing this for 1 trillion years now. And to think that Fiddler was 71, so it's pre the Star Wars and everything.
Yeah.
And yet, it's absolutely the sort of thing that he would go, okay, what is it that you need? Right, all right, well, we're going to use a little bit of the old, diminished fifth, and I'll make sure that I've got a little bit of this and a tierce pickety here and blah, blah. And to sort of take a style, as you say, a folk music-y style and run with that. Yeah, he could totally and did. So
it's pre Spielberg, isn't it? So it's because Jewel would have been, I don't even know if he did Jewel, but Jewel was after or maybe the same year as Fiddler on the Roof. Interestingly, 1971 is really the end of the musical era in Hollywood. There's not much else beyond that. You have the odd Grease or the Midnight Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Norman Jewison followed this up with my favorite movie of all time, Jesus Christ Superstar. The worst musical adaptation ever.
Oh, did he do that?
He did. And it's like, how do you go from, honestly, one of the greatest adaptations of a movie musical, second after Sound of Music maybe, to Jesus Christ Superstar, which is just a disaster on multiple levels.
But maybe it's a Lloyd Webber thing versus... Okay, so I'm interested in the fact that Fiddler on the Roof is essentially written and musicalized and directed by Jewish filmmakers, Jewish people, right? And the same with In the Heights is made for the Latino community by the Latino community for argument's sake. Whereas Andrew Lloyd Webber, and his, I guess, Christian, actually, even though technically Jesus was a Jew back in the day, but you know what I mean? His Christian musical, I don't know, maybe.
But maybe that was Jewison trying to, be
American.
Be new. No, to try something new, because Jesus Christ Superstar is a very experimental movie, right?
Right.
They filmed it in Israel, everything was sung live. You watch clips of this, and it's like, it's a fever dream, but it's a terrible adaptation.
Right.
I don't really like Jesus Christ Superstar as a musical, and I'm not a huge fan of Angelo Weber generally. I like his music. But his...
You take that back.
His shows...
JCS is so good.
This podcast has been going for 5 years too long.
It's just so Wallows and Judas's thing and everything.
But Judas he has such cool numbers.
The music's cool. I will not deny that the music. Angelo Weber's music is brilliant, but my gosh, his stories are so boring. The pacing is terrible. That show it has the random Potiphar scene. No, not Potiphar. That's Joseph.
Yeah.
Who's the guy in the beachy number?
Herod.
Yeah. Herod.
The Christ. Yes.
And I had no idea who he was when I saw it because I didn't get it. And then it just ends with him dying.
Did they add that into the movie version of Jesus Christ Superstar?
Oh yeah, Herod's definitely there. He's in front of
No. Did they add it in?
That was always there. It was there in the original test album as well.
Because not pop quiz, but another bit of trivia. In Fiddler on the Roof, in the stage show, one of my favourite numbers is The Rumour.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it in the movie.
The Rumour is on the movie soundtrack, though, so they recorded a version of it. But
And they thought, it's 3 hours, it's getting a bit long, we'll
too,
cut it out.
It's too goofy.
Let's think about goofy. So I just wanted to acknowledge that both of the films that we're talking about today have something of a dream sequence, right? And in one of them, Abuela is on the cusp of passing away. And in the other, Tevye has actually lied about the whole thing, but he conjures up this wonderful dream sequence in order to convince his wife Golda that their daughter should not actually go through with her betrothal to Laser Wolf.
The coolest name in musical history.
Yes, and so I love Tevia's Dream as a number, and partly because it was such fun to be in the behind the gravestones of my high school on the stage. But what a strange, it's very strange musically. Fruma Sarah's number that she sings, she's the wife who's all like, oh, don't you marry my husband. Melodically it goes in very strange and difficult to sing places, but it's also like, my husband hadn't seen Fiddler on the Roof, and he's like, wait, suddenly this has gone a bit thriller. Why are there zombies in this? And I'm like, just go with it. It's all good.
It feels very Gilbert and Sullivan, that whole number does.
Very weird.
Yeah. It's like something out of Ruthergore.
Yeah, right. And so that's strange, and yet it gets away with it, as far as I'm concerned.
I loved it, and cinematically it's really well put together. It
Yes.
looks great. Like those open shots, the very Tim Burton-esque kind
Yes.
of
The mist coming in.
Yeah.
I remember on stage, Former Sarah was on this giant hydraulic lift, and she
Wow.
was just swaying around over the audience, and it was pretty cool.
Wow, that's awesome. And of course, it enables Topol to be, he's so good with his little comic face and his comic timing. And I mean, you know.
There's a little comic squeal, like,
Oh, brilliant. And also just the look that he gives to God. You know how he's always looking up, his top right, as if to say, haha.
There's a few random shots. There's a few random shots in Fiddler that end with going up to the sky. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that was
He's
a choice.
talking to God a lot, but also his face will go, what are we doing here? Or are you getting this? And that sort of thing, which is terribly funny.
Do you think that those are to the audience in the stage show?
No.
He does it to God.
He's
on the
got to be
stage.
talking to God.
yeah.
Yeah, just because one of the things in the Heights, which is interesting, is that they have to bring in what's the word, like a gimmick or a conceit or a device. Device is probably fairer because otherwise, with him telling the story to the children.
So the children aren't in the show?
No, I mean the show takes place in real time over 3 days, and he's talking to the audience for a lot of that stuff.
Right.
You know, he's narrating it to the audience. And Uznavi is the narrator in the show. It is Nina's story, very much.
Wait,
very
what?
Much so.
Uznavi is not the narrator in the show.
He's the narrator.
Oh.
It's Nina's story. She's the core of the show.
So it's a man telling a story for a woman.
Well, it's a man telling a story of a community, and she's the centre of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because she
So the
doesn't
woman
even get a real ending,
Doesn't
right?
get to tell her own story. No, never mind.
Well,
Okay.
no, she because like they have the thing about how Nina's stubborn. She gets on the train, and she doesn't get to participate in the final number.
Yeah, because in the show, it is the end of the show is them selling the Rosario's business and taking it down, and she's
okay.
with them.
Okay.
And as Navi kind of wraps it together, and it's a painting of a Weller on the grate coming down that motivates Navi to stay. Vanessa doesn't have as much of a character in the show as well. She's not a
Well, she doesn't have much of a character in the movie either.
well, she's not a fashion designer. She
Right.
just is trying to get out of the community.
Oh, so they don't even give her that much.
Because
They-
I
She's
felt-
got her song, but
I felt she, out of all the main characters, was just really poorly characterized. And I guess that's just from the show as well.
yeah, she doesn't have much of a character. But I think it's interesting that they introduced this construct with the children. I do think it works. And I was sitting there going, and of course the movie opens with the crashing waves.
Yes.
And in the theatre, that was quite affecting. It was this booming crashing waves.
And if you're me and you've not seen the show, you believe you are seeing him on an island, or presumably in the
Although
Dominican
I guess
Republic.
the longer the movie went, it was like, oh, okay, I kind of see where this is
Right.
going.
I've seen the show and I thought he was on the island, and I was thinking, oh, I
He's
know that
made it.
I know that he decides to stay. So what are they doing here?
Oh, right, yeah.
But it was quite lovely, the little CGI green crab that
Yeah.
turns out to be on the wall.
Yes.
It was. I talked to our colleague, one of our colleagues at work, who is New Zealand-born Samoan, and she was talking about that part of the story really connecting with her journey, and particularly the other scene as well, where Nina says to her dad, "I'm going to bring you along for the journey. You know, we're in this new place. We're going to find home together." And for her, that was really relevant from her perspective. So I really liked how they did that, and it made sense to me because you can't. I don't know if it was Navi talking to the camera the whole time, which she does a little bit of.
Yeah.
Would sell the same way.
No,
as
I liked what they did. I assume it wouldn't have sold it to me as the same way. So good on them.
Yeah.
Tibia does, of course. He talks to the
Tibia's-
camera the whole time.
Yes, and it is very stagey, and it is exactly like it's done in the stage show as well. So it's
But then again, it's stagey and it's not, right? Because it's shot in a way as in to make it as hyper real as
That's
possible.
true.
Everything is grungy, everything is lived in. The whole Anatevka number at the very end is, is that real snow? That's probably real snow, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it feels cold and it feels remote, and I think that adds a lot to the story. But yeah, at the same time, also quite stagey.
Yeah, and yet it works. But it works. It feels more like, I'm suddenly thinking of Evita, which of course we talked about many episodes ago.
I do like that, Andrew Lloyd Webber. I think that's got a good story.
And that was I thought that was beautifully created for a film, as well as absolutely. And you are in those locations, and as you are in the Heights.
But because I think one of the great things about Fiddler, the movie adaptation, is that even though the music is not diegetic, or some of it's not, it always feels diegetic, right? They don't kind of break this illusion to start singing.
Like in Sound of Music, perhaps, which is more of and now we're going to sing a song.
Yeah, I would say so. Like kind of in contrast with something like Sound of Music, where there's a complete break between the narrative stuff and the musical stuff. In Fiddler, both in the show and in the movie, the sense that the music is part of the world, I think, is really, really important for the overall feeling of the whole piece.
Would you feel that that's a comparison with In the Heights?
I think so as well. Although, I don't know, something about In the Heights, maybe it's just the sound mix, but I started off the movie, and maybe this is nitpicking, I felt like some of the sound mixing of the voices was odd, and I read later that they had various different types of sound mixing, right? Sometimes voices were recorded live, sometimes it was post. But something didn't quite sit right in the reality of the thing. And it was only later on where, I think around the time of the blackout, it's like, okay, this is kind of their reality, and my brain understands that now.
I mean, I'm just thinking about Fiddler, is that it's so clearly overdubbed a lot of Tevia's lines.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But, it's fine. It's the time of the spaghetti westerns. I'm really keen to talk about John Chu, what's the director's name?
John Chu.
John Chu. His direction of In the Heights, because there's some interesting flares, and I hear you, William, in terms of the quite quick cuts of particularly 96,000 and what's going on there. And of course, to link back to Motz's verse, what was it? Machines?
Mitchell's verse.
Mitchell's verse Machines, and some of the animated flares in that film, and you've got those animated pieces in 96,000.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So there's some and also the whole graphics with the train feels very crazy.
And when they're dancing in the street in the Heights, there's some bits out there. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
I liked it. I liked it. I didn't like the huge pieces of material flying down like it was some iPhone ad.
Oh yeah.
Did not like
a
that.
banner.
Yeah, but the little Mitchell's interstitial stuff. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I forgot about that.
I think that was out of place.
I really like the crash explosion over the screen in the Heights title coming up. And I realized near the end of the In the Heights number, I was like, oh, the title hasn't come up, and it's coming. I know they're going to do it. And then it was like, In the Heights. I was like, yes! It reminds me of the opening of A Star Is Born, which was it wasn't like a crash, but if you remember, Gaga's walking down the alleyway singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and the A Star Is Born comes up. And both graphically very 70s, I would guess. Very retro feeling.
It reminds me of the beginning of Drive in that way. I don't know if you remember that, but there's this terrific sort of heist scene, and then Drive in beautiful hot pink fluoro across the screen, again in a retro sort of font.
Well, in the Heights, that kind of title crash also reminded me of La La Land. How first number ends, bam, in your face.
I think it's something we've lost. It's coming back, obviously, but I think about James Cameron's films of the 80s. He did a lot of that. Or, John Carpenter's The Thing, when, the title having a character of its own. Or think of Terminator and the
sometimes there are films
words.
now and they don't do a title at all. Yeah. And you get 9 minutes in and you're like, I guess we're not getting one.
Where's the title?
And then the whole thing happens and you don't get the cast list till the end.
We may talk about this in the future, wink wink, but Fast and Furious 9, I was waiting for that title drop. There was a moment where it was like, okay, here we go. And then 2 hours later, they showed the title at the very end of the credits.
Yeah. Do you know, I think Star Wars was a film that really changed the game for that George Lucas had to fight to not have a title sequence and not have to have all the credits at the start of the film. It was quite a big deal.
Wow.
And it was quite a big deal legally, like for unions and things like that. But I love a good title sequence. I like a choice that makes sense, so I'm not just going to want a title sequence for the sake of it. But there's something about seeing the vibe of the movie through text and design that's quite thrilling.
That website art of the title, it's so good.
Yeah.
And stuff like, when we do get good title sequences, I mean, things that jump to mind, like Scott Pilgrim did a fantastic title sequence. Stuff like that makes movies feel new again.
Yep.
Which is weird because that's what we moved away from for the longest time.
And maybe feel like an event as well, like the Bond movies, the classic
Yes,
Saul and
yes.
Elaine Bass openings for Pink Panther and all those sorts of things, then that was the good old days.
Yeah. Tarantino loves a good title sequence, doesn't he?
He does. He likes a retro font as well, doesn't he? Hey?
He's got that one font that he used for most of his movies for a while. Cool. Well, final thoughts. William, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. It was really cool comparing these two musicals, and I'm glad I've seen In the Heights now because I know I didn't get to see your show, Jeremy, when we were there. And having really loved Hamilton, going back to see, okay, so this is kind of where a lot of the components of Hamilton came from. Obviously, like you, Sarah, Fiddler is part of my DNA. Like, I listened through it throughout childhood. And it's an amazing film, but just really, really cool to compare these two films specifically.
Excellent. I love Fiddler on the Roof, and surprisingly so. I had heard about it growing up. I remember one of my uncles saying, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. And I was like, okay, uncle. And just really enjoyed rewatching it again and experiencing the music and the visuals and the sense of humor. I think it's a very funny piece. In the Heights was something that I was incredibly excited about seeing. I was very satisfied with the movie. I would like to see it again. I haven't had a chance to yet. And I thought they did a really good job of making the film of it, which within that I'm including the changes because I think they did need to reshuffle that story in that film, and they had to cull some numbers to actually craft a 3-act structure out of it, and I thought they did a really good job. I thought the casting as well was quite impressive, considering there were no real names in there apart from Anthony Ramos and
Jimmy
Linda
Smits,
and Jimmy Schmitz, yes. But
and Stephanie Beatriz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. She's one of the saloon ladies.
She is too. But I thought they did a really wonderful job, and I cried through most of it for various reasons. Probably the same reasons I cried through the last Harry Potter book, which was I was just so connected to this text that anything that I felt was satisfying, funny, or connected with me, I just started crying out of emotion.
Did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I had a great time. Sarah, final words.
Fiddler, we know what I think. And I shall maybe make it a tradition to watch it more regularly than every 20 years. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it this time, despite loving the music. I just thought, it's still going to feel dated and slow and 3 hours, what? And it's going to be sad at the end, like Sound of Music, what? But, all good. In the Heights was thoroughly enjoyable. I didn't emotionally connect to it, and something that we haven't really been able to discuss, but I think also partly because we're not in the same position as many of our friends for whom the immigrant story was desperately resonant and meaningful and affecting, and it would be wonderful to explore that a bit more, and that is not my tale, and so I think that I missed out a little bit there. I thought it was vibrant and fun and cool and overwhelming, and musically there were bits that were terrific, and then there were bits that were fine, and I'm not in a rush to see it again. But I am heartened, Jeremy, by everything that you've told me about the changes that they made from the show. It seems to me the show isn't something I'm going to be racing to go and want to watch, but that I like what they did with the film very much.
Cool. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode, or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then,
No ora mai!